Good afternoon. It's Monday, August 10th. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. This is our scheduled weekly update on the COVID crisis. And in addition to giving you an update on COVID, we'll also discuss the circumstances of our power outages in Westchester County. That's now into day 6, and discuss any other questions that our friends of the press may have for us. We are at a very stressful time. It's one of the most obvious things a person could say at a moment like this. We have dealt with the COVID crisis now for 5 months. In addition to that, we know that the COVID crisis has triggered a fiscal crisis that involves individuals, businesses, not-for-profits, and governments, including our government, that we face fiscal problems, the likes of which we have not seen in Westchester County, as far as we can tell, in any trackable history. We also have been challenged since the murder of George Floyd with an issue of racial and social justice that has come to fruition at a time with great intensity. And now we also face a power outage that has, here at least in our area, in the New York metropolitan area, made it very difficult for people under such existing stress to now deal with one more blow to the normal life that they choose to live. So as we go through these things, we'll talk about some of the steps and actions we're going to take. The most important thing that I can say to my fellow residents of Westchester County is we are being tested, and we are going to come through this test. It is not particularly clear to any one of us exactly how that's going to happen. It's of no comfort to someone who is sitting on day 6 without power. It is not something that we know exactly how it affects every single person in different parts of the county, those who are without power, those who might have power but do not have a telephone or data service. But in every one of these things, I have confidence that we're going to work through them. And there will be ample time to discuss what happened and why, and to identify where the failings are, and to fix those failings. We will certainly take our share of responsibility as a county government, as a county administration, but we will also not be shy in a very calm way to point out other failings as well. And the most important reason to do that is not just for accountability, but to correct what's wrong, so that this doesn't happen again and again and again, which is how everyday people feel, that this is just another repetition of the same old mistakes that are made. Nothing gets better. And that is the most corrosive in a democracy, the sense that no matter what we do, things are going to be bad and there's nothing we can do to make them better. I reject that as a philosophy, and as we get into some of our discussions, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in practical terms, day-to-day terms. First of all, where we are with the COVID-19 outbreak in Westchester County, with the statistics that we have as of today available online through the COVID-19 Health Tracker, New York State Department of Health, we continue to track a number of different metrics. Today's numbers show that there are 434 active cases of COVID, meaning the total number of people who were tested positive year-to-date to this point, less all of the people that were tested positive that have gone through the 2-week incubation period. All of those individuals now have gone past the period of potential illness and potential fatality. And so the active cases are the people who fall within that zone that have not gone through the 2-week period of time. 434 cases today. A week ago, last Monday, we had 463 cases. So that's a reduction of almost 30 active cases. Now, from day to day, those numbers go up a little, go down a little, but you try to look at them in 1-week intervals, 1-month intervals to see a trend. So a week ago, 463 active cases. On July 10th, a month ago today, we had 526 active cases. So a month later, 526 down to 434. That's about a 20% reduction. And of course, if you want some sort of a baseline number, we'll go back to April 10th, which was 4 months ago today. And that was still considered the peak period of time that we had for COVID expansion. We had 1,186 active cases. So 4 months ago, 1,186. 1 month ago, 526. Last week, 463. Today, 434. The testing for COVID has been one consistent positive, where we've consistently done sufficient testing day after day after day in the 3,000 to 4,000 range of individuals, so that as of today we have 428,800 COVID tests here in Westchester County. Now, we could roughly say that it's one person per test. There are certainly second and third tests for different individuals for different reasons, but by and large, That number is pretty accurate, and on a basis of 1 million people in Westchester County, that's well over 40% of the population that's been tested for COVID. And the public health officials tell us that one of the key tools that we have to fight this disease, when we know we don't have a vaccine and we know we don't have an antiviral drug treatment, is to test, and then, of course, after testing, isolate for 2 weeks. And those numbers all fit in together. 428,000 plus testing. A week ago, we had tested 400,000. So we've tested 28,000 within the last week, in the last 7 days. That's an average of about 4,000 a day. If you go back a month ago, we had 308,000. So that is a total testing of 120,000 people within the space of the last month. And if you go all the way back to that date 4 months ago, we had tested 55,000 people. So our rate of testing has increased dramatically to the point that we are today. Total number of positives is 36,233 as of today. That's roughly a little over 200 positives in the last week, and that compares favorably to where we were going back again to the 1 month and the 4 month ago period of time. Gives you an idea of how many positives we had so quickly, because the first positive case came on March 3rd. And on April 10th, by then we had 18,000 cases, meaning in the ramp up, the spread of the infection in the initial stage, we went from 0 to 18,000 cases in slightly more than a month. In the last month, we've had slightly over 200 cases. 18,000 cases in a month and a half. In the beginning of the phase, just 200 cases in the last month over this period of time. I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking. It's 200 just in the last week. It's about 1,000 over the last month. But it still shows the ratio of many more positives in the front end of this than we have now. That is a good sign. At one point, we were testing 1 out of every 3 people testing positive for COVID. Now it's 1 out of every 10 people, or about a 9% ratio of positive tests. The statistics are not so that you can write them in a little book as you would keep baseball statistics. It's to show that the level of infection here in Westchester County has dropped. And that's important because here in Westchester, we have opened restaurants, we've opened retail establishments, we've opened offices, we've opened our county beaches and our pools. And in local homeowner complexes, they've opened pools and they've opened beaches where they have them. And throughout all of those different changes, we've been able to maintain a decreasing level of infection and a decreasing level of impact. Our fatality numbers show a tremendous drop in the number of fatalities. Every fatality is a tragedy. Every person that dies is somebody's relative, somebody's loved one, somebody's friend, somebody's co-worker, somebody's person that they know in a community. So we don't minimize it. But over the course of the last week, we have lost 1 person to death, just 1 in the last week. Over the last month, we've lost a total of 14 people. Compare that to where we were 4 months ago, where in consecutive nights we lost 35 people and 72 people in consecutive nights. Over 100 people in 2 nights back in April at a time frame that's analogous to this one. We've lost 1 in the last week, and we've lost 14 in the last month. That is a sign of progress. That's a sign of reduction in terms of fatalities. Now, our hospitalization numbers have pretty much flattened out in the 40 to 45 range. And what that presumes is that people are entering the hospital and they're ill, but they're recovering and they're going back home because the fatality rate is not growing. In fact, the fatality rate is fairly low. So we've had about 45 people. The hospitalization numbers are a few days behind whatever we report at this point in time. The last number we had showed 45 people hospitalized, but it was a few days ago. But that number has oscillated now over the last month because actually a month ago we had almost the same number of hospitalizations that we have now. They may in fact be many of the same people that are continuing hospitalized, or they could be some number of people leaving and then some new people coming in. But the hospitalization rate has stayed relatively flat. In order to know if the virus is spreading, you look at a number of different factors. How many new infections you have, those numbers are low. How many net active cases you have, those numbers are dropping. How many people are hospitalized? You could have more people hospitalized even if you have a net number dropping, because those that do contract it are getting very, very sick. But that number's flat. And then, of course, you look at fatalities as the worst of all possible scenarios. And so in all of those numbers that we're providing, it's not for the number for the sake of the number. It's how do you interpret the number? Anybody in any business context will tell you it's not just the gross number. It's interpreting what that means about what's happening to your business. And in this particular case, this is what's happening to the virus here in Westchester County. Now, we are not an island in the middle of an ocean. We're connected directly to another state. We're a baseball throw from a third state. We have the greatest city in the world and the largest city in the country right next door to us. So all of those are factors that we keep in mind. Our travel between Westchester County and other communities is pretty robust. People come in from other counties. We go to other counties. So it is also a good sign that while I don't track the regional numbers from other counties around us or the city of New York or New Jersey or Connecticut, that we would certainly be spiking if those areas around us were spiking as well. So all of this is a good sign. We are not through the woods yet, and I would argue that it is the wearing of masks, the social distancing, and the hand sanitizing that is helping us keep these numbers in line. And I repeat this every time I do this. We don't wear masks because it's a fashion statement. We don't wear masks because it's some statement of ideology. We wear masks to prevent other people from being infected by whatever we have. And when those other people wear masks, they prevent themselves from infecting us. And that's what the mission is here. And I understand that in parts of the country, even parts of the state, mask wearing is not universal. But let us in Westchester do what we know we have to do to the greatest extent possible. And I think that with exceptions, and there's always exceptions, they always get reported over the weekends, we have had a very high level of compliance of people doing this voluntarily, so they understand what the logic of this is and why it's important for us to do that. Now, we've opened restaurants, retail, beaches, pools, offices with some success. Now we have a major task ahead of us, and that is opening the public school systems of New York State, Westchester County. The governor announced on Friday that he was authorizing school districts to open. School districts, there's 44 in Westchester. A couple of them also include Putnam County, that each of them had to submit plans for what reopening would look like with a host of different protocols. And those protocols involve not just what you do physically to keep people safe, but how you intend to educate children. The county government does not directly control school districts. We are a sister level of government, if you will, a sibling level of government. And their responsibilities, as it is true of the county as well, go directly to the state of New York. The state of New York sets the rules for how these things operate. But it is our responsibility to coordinate with the school districts and help them implement elements of their plan. What are some of those elements that the county has to deal with the school districts in? We have a working group that was impaneled a couple of weeks ago. Joe Glazer, who's our Deputy Commissioner of Mental Health, has been working directly. We've worked through Joe Ricca, who's the Superintendent of Schools in White Plains, and he heads a consortium group of school superintendents. The biggest single issues is how will the County Department of Health assist the school districts in testing and checking the health level of those who are working or attending school once school's open and once there is a physical presence to school. The education process will involve some remote learning and some in-person learning. And on the in-person side, when there's teachers and administrators and school students and others that may be in the building, custodial workers and so forth, how do we maintain public health? That responsibility falls from an oversight standpoint on our county Department of Health. And so therefore we are working with the school districts on plans on how we're going to sanitize the various physical assets of a school, which you can just imagine are, just multiple. You feed kids at school, there's a cafeteria function. You have a gymnasium function, you have the bathroom, functions. There's a host of different things. It's not just, sort of a simplified office environment that we're working in. But we also have to do, in addition to testing, targeted testing whenever a case may arise in the future when the doors are open. We're responsible for doing contact tracing. And contact tracing is an essential tool, as is testing, in trying to keep the virus from advancing. And contact tracing means professionals under the direction of the county who will speak to the person that tests positive and identifying all the people that person has come in contact with so that they can be tested and, if necessary, isolated to stop the spread of the virus. This is not a simple process, and it's complicated in a school setting. We have the complications in the school setting with younger children, kindergarten, first, second, and third graders. It's going to be tough for them to keep masks on. It's going to be tough for them to remember who they interacted with. We're looking for the kind of specificity that's sometimes hard to get out of adults, much less out of children. And then when you get to the older students in high school, They have to be, while they're capable of understanding what you're saying, they have to give it the same weight and importance. And one of the issues we've had to deal with in the society at large, outside of the school setting, is how do 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds react when asked to change their lifestyle, when intrinsically they feel very empowered by their youthful physicality, don't think they're going to get the disease, don't feel the urgency and the need to respond the way people who are much older would respond because of a much greater sense of how the disease could affect them. So all of these challenges are within the opening of schools. That is the next biggest thing. There are parts of the society that have not yet opened, and they all will await the governor's discretion. The Governor Cuomo, has taken his executive authority as governor to make decisions as to what is open and what is closed, and he has released that authority in bits and pieces over time, which is how we've opened up these different parts of the society. In opening schools, we are opening a major entity within our society. It's an economic impact. Obviously, the education of our children may be the single most important public service that we provide, but it also directly involves other types of decisions that have still yet to be made. The governor has not yet authorized the opening of gyms and health clubs. The governor has not yet authorized the opening of movie theaters. He has kept the number of individuals that can congregate at a public event outside or inside to 50 people. And so certain kinds of activities fall by the wayside because those numbers are not falling within the numbers that are allowable. He's also put a restriction for people who travel into New York who have been recently in one of any number of states, and it's a large number of states, where the infection is rising, and those individuals, when they return into the state of New York, need to be quarantined. But the ability of government to enforce that outside of, say, an airport setting where you have a controlled environment, 40 people get off an airplane, it's much more difficult when people travel by car. And it's much more difficult because now on the quarantine list are a large number of states. Some of them have been put back on, some off, and many times when you travel by car, there's no real way to interdict people to determine where they've been. You can ask them the questions, and you'll see how it plays out. Most of it is on the honor system, which may or may not be effective. But all of those issues are still ahead of us in COVID. So as I deliver what are fundamentally good numbers, continued small diminution of the spread of COVID, we also understand that we have to continue certain behaviors, harder to do in the month of August and in the hot summer, harder to do when vacation travel comes up and people go where they want to go, to try to find some relief from not just the physical strain, but the mental strain that this represents. This is a complete change in the way we function as society. And it's had effect on other things, which we'll talk about in a second with the power outages. But all of these things are important for us to try to monitor and to manage as best as we can. This is our challenge. This is our test as a generation. I've said that, most every time I've had a chance to speak about the topic. But this is a test. And the test isn't resolved in a day. It isn't resolved in a month. It isn't resolved next week if I have equally good numbers to report, or in a month from today when they're better still numbers. This is an ongoing battle. And I refer, as I've done once or twice before, to stories that I heard from my parents about going through 8 years of a depression, 4 years of a world war, not 4 weeks, not 4 months, 4 years of sacrifice. And we will know that when the sacrifice ends, when the medical health professionals tell us we have a vaccine and we have an antiviral and it is, 75, 85% effective, and we've gone through the changing of the lifestyles. Maybe we'll see some herd immunity at some point in time. These are concepts that, as a non-scientific individual, I read about, but I don't know how to weigh them. We'll let the science community tell us when we're at the right point for the COVID advancement. But all of these things are very important. I will mention that as we work with the local school districts, we have developed a frequently asked questions document, which will be available on our website, westchestergov.com. It'll be trackable under our coronavirus information. Parents will have a host of questions. Some of them will be answered in the frequently asked questions. But keep in mind, our mission with the school district is a public health mission. It's not an educational mission. The educational questions will be answered by the school districts in concert with the state education department at the state level of government. And hopefully all of these things would be helpful. I want to publicly thank Joe Glazer for leading this group. He has done an exemplary job while he's in the mental health department as a deputy commissioner. He's been on loan for these issues under the direction of Dr. Charlita Amler, our commissioner of public health, who's also done an exemplary job. And we're very, hopeful that depending on what happens with the schools, we'll be able to deal with the school situation in the way we have with others. But let us not make a mistake. Opening schools is infinitely more complex than opening a pool, opening a restaurant, opening any of these things that we've done successfully so far. This is a major challenge. Parents are rightfully concerned about the health of their children. And all of us who are parents, at whatever age our children are, nothing matters to us more than our children. Not our jobs, not our cars, not the houses we live in. Our children are the single most important thing in our lives. And therefore, we put them in the care of a school district, and we hope that together, working with the school district, will have a positive effect. On the issue of the hurricane that came through our county last Tuesday and the outages that resulted, and then the response to that. We are now in, we'll treat it as day 6 of this crisis, and unfortunately, as I said earlier, it adds on to other things happening in our society. The COVID outbreak would be enough. The COVID outbreak has generated a fiscal crisis, and then, of course, we have as well the social racial justice crisis that we face. And now on top of that, in this area at least, we have a hurricane that has knocked out power for thousands of individuals, and with power, not just the value of electricity, but the communications that we have through our telephone systems, and then also our ability to access data through the very many ways we do that. And it comes at a time, because of COVID, where people are home. They're home rather than working in another setting, and they've lost power, and they lose all contact with the outside world at a time where we are all very stressed out. Let me give you a few statistics. First of all, as I did with COVID, we'll do the same thing. We have 2 utility suppliers for power that cover Westchester County. Con Edison covers about 90%, 85 to 90% of our county. All of the southern and central parts of Westchester County are covered by Con Ed, and there's a section of the north and northwest sections of Westchester County that are covered by Con Ed. In the north central and northeast section of Westchester County, New York State Electric and Gas, NYSEG by the acronym, provides the electric power in that area. NYSEG's customer base is about 33,000, not quite 35,000 customers. Con Edison's base is more than 10 times the size of that, 360,000 customers. A customer is one entity. There may be a number of people who live in that. And a customer might be a multifamily building where there's a single customer and 85 people within the building. So Con Edison provides the larger portion of this, NYSEG the smaller portion. As of the 12 noon hour, Con Edison still has 18,975 customers without power in Westchester County. 18,975 as of 12 noon. NYSEG is functionally fully back online, under 40 customers not yet connected. And given the circumstances, these are probably individual homes that are hard to reach because of certain situations for that unique situation. But functionally, NYSEG customers are back up. Con Edison, 18,000 out of 360,000 that are still without power. But this is day 6. The incident happened last Tuesday. Now, let me try to give you a little idea of the flow of time. Just as I gave you some comparables on COVID, let me give you some comparables on power statistics. So we're going to do these in 12-hour intervals. Con Edison, Saturday morning, 9 a.m., 52,000 customers out. By 9 p.m. that night, Saturday night, this is still day 4, 36,800 customers out. The following morning, Sunday, 9 a.m., day 5, 34,800 some odd customers out. 9 o'clock last night, Sunday evening, 22,140. That's the end of day 5. This morning begins day 6. We began the morning 19,173, and then at the 12 o'clock hour, I mentioned 18,975. That gives you an idea of how it has been going along since the weekend. On the NYSEG side, the numbers are much smaller, as I've described. Saturday morning, 53 hours ago, 5,200 customers out. 9 o'clock Saturday night, 2,500 customers out. Sunday morning, 9 a.m., 1,700 customers out. Sunday evening, 480 customers out. And then as of this morning, 37 customers out. So that gives you a sense of how the flow is with NYSEG. I think it's pretty clear, and in speaking with our various local elected officials, those in the NYSEG region, which would be North Salem, Lewisboro, Pound Ridge, a significant portion of Bedford, Somers, and a portion of Yorktown, have all said that NYSEG has responded very well, reasonably well in all of this. Over the course of this weekend, I had a chance to talk to Carl Taylor, who is the president of NYSEG, and we had a very candid conversation, and it was a helpful conversation, I thought. The Con Ed side has been much more problematic, and the Con Ed side is the much larger portion of Westchester County. I also had a conversation over the weekend with Tim Cawley of Con Edison, and the private conversation, we exchanged our respective bits of information. Con Edison has had daily calls at 11 o'clock each of the days during the course of this power outage. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, this morning, Monday, 11 o'clock calls with Con Ed. NYSEG had 2 o'clock calls daily. So when people, it was canceled today because now we're functionally back up with NYSEG. In each of these calls, every single community is represented on the calls. And we go through community by community by community, what's in, what's out, what's a concern, and so forth. And our colleagues in local government are not shy in expressing their concern, their outrage, and their anger, because there's one thing that's an absolute constant over the course of these 5 days. It's the anger of individuals, and it's significant. And it's directed everywhere. I had the opportunity to drive through numerous neighborhoods over the course of this weekend. And I'd roll the window down, just driving myself. I'd see a couple of people standing outside. Hey, do you have power? That question could launch 1,000 ships. And it was clear that people were upset. And when they found out I was an elected official, didn't matter whether I was county executive or dog catcher, they let loose because they're frustrated and they're angry. And they have a right to be angry. The frustration is the direction of where the anger is and what kind of authority and power. I mentioned this on Friday, and it bears repeating. Your village trustee, your village mayor, your town councilman, your town supervisor, your city mayor and your city councilman, your Westchester County legislator, your county executive do not have any direct authority over the utilities. These utilities are licensed by the state of New York, and it is the state of New York that has the authority and the power over them. People will say, well, can't you talk to them and get my lights on? We talk to them all day long. What I can't do is order them. I can't go up to a crew and say, hey, I'm the county executive. You know what you're going to do? You're going to go over there and set up that power connection next. And that, of course, is frustrating because people who don't have power have all of the concurrent problems with it. And I understand exactly what this is like. Where I live, in the very small house that I live in my home community, I had trees down at every possible entrance into the neighborhood that I live in. I could not drive down the street that I live on, and I had to park at a distance. I had to duck under wires nearest to my property before getting into my residence as well. So when people say, well, you're the county executive, you must be living in a castle on a hill and everything is fine, I went through the same thing others did. Now, some are without power today. I have power today and haven't had for a couple days. But the bottom line is it is not a matter of lack of sensitivity or understanding. And I think sometimes what people want to see is they just want to see you get loud. They want to see you get angry. I did that, if you recall, 2.5 years ago, my first couple of months on the job as county executive. But you don't get angry for show. You get angry because there's a legitimate reason to be angry. And in fairness, I look in day 2 of the crisis. The incident happens on day 1. On day 2, are you doing the assessment of all the damage? And are you opening up all the public roads? That's the single most important thing. If it's a very mild incident and you can restore everybody on the second day, you go one night without power, that's not ideal, but it's understandable. I went 7 days without power, which is longest during Sandy. Sandy's 7 days without power. Not a picnic, but it was understandable. It was a major hurricane. It destroyed major infrastructure. This hurricane was not a major hurricane. This hurricane had high winds in a concentrated period of time, and it was a fast-moving storm. I said many of these things on Friday. Perhaps you wouldn't, sit by your TV waiting to hear whatever I'm saying. But the bottom line is that the high winds of this storm caused destruction in a very short period of time. By 3 o'clock that day, it was sunny outside. And if you were, in a location where you didn't see the impact of the trees, you would have thought this was just a bad rainstorm that came through the area. Well, it was a lot worse than a bad rainstorm. and the trees that were pulled up were pulled out, pulled over, and took the wires down with them. I would say also there's always a conversation about pruning trees. This was not a storm that would have changed by pruning trees, because it wasn't limbs that came down, it was whole trees that came down. And I saw it for myself in locations all across this county. I stopped in Chappaqua and Pleasantville and Mount Kisco this weekend. I was all along the Sound Shore from Port Chester to Pelham. I made time to be in Eastchester and Yonkers and Greenburgh and elsewhere and further up county. And we're looking at significant impacts of trees having fallen, taken wires out, making them difficult to operate on. But all of these numbers show that there's still a significant number of people out, and there is no reason why on day 6 we should not be up. There's no reason. There's no reason. There's one reason: lack of manpower. Insufficient manpower to be able to put teams out in the field. The men, those women who are there, who are on the cut and clear teams, which is the first round, we have to cut the power and clear the obstruction, and the restoration teams, the folks out in the bucket trucks who know how to reattach the wires. They put up the either the new permanent or the temporary pole so they can restring the wires. Those people know what they're doing. And I must say, we've been very fortunate to have plenty of mutual aid. You've seen the trucks around from all across the United States. I've seen crews from Iowa and Indiana so far, and I've seen a West Virginia truck drive by me on the highway. And these folks who have come in from other states are coming to New York, and they're adding their expertise to help get us back up. But the fundamental question remains: we do not have enough people on staff to handle these incidents. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to have mutual aid every time we have a major event. So now the question is, what do we do about that? And this is where our state legislators will have a voice and the PSC will have executive authority, because it's the Public Service Commission appointees of the governor that have the ability to take certain action, and the governor has power to take certain action vis-a-vis the utilities. And the state legislature, and they've already indicated this. I spoke with State Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who leads the state Senate, spoke with members of the Assembly. They're having a series of hearings where they intend to bring the utility companies' executives before them and ask the detailed questions. Now, somebody might say, yeah, you're going to ask them questions. What does that mean? The proper identification of what happened and why is essential. We know you're mad that you don't have power, but we need to understand exactly what was the workforce that was out there on the first day. When was the call for additional help? When did that call go out? How long did it take for those people to come in? And then under what basis did you make the call the day you made it? And then what were you doing in anticipation of the storm prior to that? How many incidents were trackable? Because we had a second problem, and the second problem was communications. And communications was extremely poor. And I have to be candid with you. There are companies whose life is about communications. This is what they do. They provide telephone and data service. That's communications, and they fail to communicate in an intelligent and an open way. Or when they did communicate, the information they gave was erroneous. And there's no getting away from that. We had a call today with Altice. We had a call today with Verizon. And there was a lot of anger expressed between local officials that could not reach key people over the course of the weekend and therefore could not understand what was happening. We found out subsequently that to provide cable services, Altice has certain nodes located around the county that I guess take the power and then can move the signal about a municipality through this node. That node needs to be electrified at all times. It operates on a battery, but the battery can't keep the node alive beyond a certain point in time. So you need a generator to kick in when normal electrical flow is stopped. Well, Altice made the decision not to continue those generators. Cost-cutting service. Generators are not cheap, and to maintain a large number of them is an expensive proposition. But as a cost-cutting procedure, when the system shuts down and there's no electric going into those nodes, then there's no telephone and there's no data. And the people sitting in the darkened homes can't use their telephone to reach anybody. Now, it's one thing to conduct business from home. I've been doing it too, as some of us have. What happens when a person has a heart attack? What happens when a person goes through a life-threatening situation where seconds are essential and you can't use your cell phone, You can't use your hardline phone. And you're perhaps in a remote area where the nearest hospital is X number of miles away. That's the risk when our systems go down. Not just our inconvenience, but life or death matters. Now, the state legislature and the governor will have the responsibility to look into those things. I have served in the state legislature. I understand the process is not a quick one. And don't think that this is just about any one utility, because I've read on Long Island the same arguments being made here are being made toward the Long Island utilities. And some of the same concerns are being expressed in Connecticut to Connecticut utilities. This becomes something bigger. And that's why I've argued that we need to take a concept and turn it into some reality by having a utility reserve corps that is analogous to having the National Guard or the Army Reserve, or if you want to draw the analogy, although this would be a professionalized, compensated group of people, a volunteer fire department and a police auxiliary. We need to have extra people at the ready that can be brought in a moment's notice to help us dig out of this. And if we don't make that kind of a change, no matter whatever else other proposals we have, we're going to harden our infrastructure. We're going to trim trees. We're going to bury some lines. You know, we're going to take a look at what burying the lines means. It's a huge price tag, but let's do the homework and we'll show it to everybody. You'll have a chance to evaluate it, how much money it would cost to bury lines. And burying lines are not a panacea because things can happen underground to compromise the lines as well. But we'll look at all of these different things. But to me, as I've observed this, now the second major set of problems that I've gone through in my position as county executive, we don't have enough people to put out boots on the ground at the time necessary. And if we don't change that, Hurricane Ignatz will come along. Hurricane Jeremiah will come along. Hurricane Karen will come along. You notice I'm going in alphabetical order since the hurricane that hit us, Hurricane I. And we'll have the same thing. Nothing will change. Nothing will change until we put enough people capable of cutting and clearing, and then enough people capable of restoration on the ground fast enough before we get to day 6. I'm not a hothead that says everything overnight, day 1, day 2, day 3 has got to be done. But there's no excuse for day 6. There's no excuse for it. And that's where we are today. And that's why my tone is different than it was on Friday, because we've now had extra days to work with, and we can see that we've got a structural problem in the personnel that's been put aside to handle these problems. And the combination of the utilities and the government are going to have to work their way through that, and that's essential. Now, let me share a few other pieces of information before we open it up to questions. A number of municipalities have created cooling centers and charging centers, places where you can go to plug in your electronic material into the wall. There's power there if you don't have power at home, and you can charge it up. And there's also places you can go generally during the daytime. I don't think any of these are overnight. That represent a place to be cooled off if you're dealing with now what is particularly warm heat today and tomorrow, as expected, and you're still without power. There's a long list of them by municipality. We're going to put them up on our website, westchestergov.com, so you can go take a look, download it. If you have cell service, I would suggest you call your town, city, or village government, and those that have cooling stations or charging areas will tell you about it, and you're able to go and at least buy yourself a couple of hours of relief from the hot weather, and you're able to charge up your electric services. All of these things are appropriate. We do have, from the county standpoint, because of our access to power, Croton Point Beach is open. Sprain Ridge Pool in Greenberg, Yonkers is open, and Tibbetts Brook Pool in Yonkers is open. They're open because we have power at those locations. We are not open at Wilson Woods Pool in Mount Vernon. We are not open in Saxon Woods Pool in White Plains. And Playland Beach is normally closed on a Monday. We'll see if we've got the power necessary. But if you do go to Playland, you will see those out of state trucks queued up there, because over the weekend we granted, Westchester County granted use of our Playland Park. We had a very lovely Friday night drive-in movie. And then by Saturday, the driving in with the guys from Indiana and Ohio, and Iowa and Ohio that came to give us power. The county golf courses are all open, but some of them do have limited power. Most of our other parks don't really require enjoying it with electricity, the nature walks and so forth, so they're open. Con Edison has indicated that dry ice is available at 2 locations in Westchester County. In North Castle, which is Armonk, the North Castle Community Park, which is 205 Business Park Drive in Armonk. That's right off of Route 22. exit 3 off of I-684, so it's easily reachable if you're not just in North Castle. Primarily the Con Edison folks, some of them in Bedford North, but most of the rest south, can go up 684 to Armonk, get off at exit 3, find your way to 205 Business Park Drive. Distribution will go until 9 p.m., key next few words, or until supplies run out. So let's hope that the supplies will be there up tonight if you make the trek there. The other location is in the southern part of the county, the Cross County Shopping Center in Yonkers. Distribution will also go to 9 o'clock. And this is something that if you need dry ice to try to maintain what you have under refrigeration, if you've gone 5 days without refrigeration, it's a tough call. You're going to go out and buy some new things now and try to keep them cold, and the dry ice will help you be able to do that. Those things apply. We'll go to questions in just a second. My final comments on all of this. I think the ability to respond in a moment of crisis is really the resiliency of us as people. And how focused we are at solving problems is key. Anger is a part of human life, so is happiness. You don't usually get a lot of happiness expressed here in the public domain. When you're happy personally, in your personal life. But you don't really express that happiness in a public domain. But you do express anger and unhappiness. And that is certainly a dominant feeling for a lot of people. Even for people whose power is back on, they're not happy over the way it happened. And if it took them until Saturday, they're not joyous that the power is back on. They expected the power to be back on sooner than that. We all owe a responsibility to do our jobs, whatever our jobs are. My dad was a maintenance man. My mom was a factory worker. They had jobs, and I have a job, and we have to do our jobs. I think it's important for us to understand that the people doing the jobs, the people who are out there actually in harness, slung up the pole, reattaching the wires, that's not the source of our anger. And the source of our anger are not the men and women who are out there cutting the tree down that's been blocking your house for the course of the weekend and making sure that there's no juice in the wires. So to express your anger to those people, to see people coming in from another state who are 1,000 miles from their home and they're here to help us get power, that's not the source of the anger. And sometimes people come from another area, they don't know the logistics and the realities here. They may ask a question or say something that sets you off the wrong way. We have to direct our anger into concrete work. That concrete work has to come at the Public Service Commission level. Everything else, you can walk out of your house and tell the guy down the block and dump a load on him. But the people that need to hear it, that need to work on this, are the Public Service Commission of New York State. The members of that Public Service Commission that have the authority over the regulation of these utilities, and to be able to accurately track what happened and why, and to be able to drill down not just to the circumstances of how things failed, but what we do to correct it. I'm pretty much fixed in my mind about what I think the problems are. I think they're understaffed and underdeployed, and that the communication isn't free-flowing because the information that you would receive is not going to be well received. We don't have enough people to get to your house for 5 days. That's the information. So I'm going to speak more generally. We'll have everybody up by such and such a date or time and so forth, because we just don't have enough people out there to do it. And the honest answer is, why don't you have enough people out there? Because it's not profitable for you to do that. Okay, let's not accept that as the final answer. Let's go beyond that and determine what is it that's necessary. If a building was burning down and you had 10 firefighters working on the fire, and somebody said, hey, we're going to need 15 more firefighters, you're not going to say, nothing we can do. We only got 10 firefighters. Building's going to burn. That's not the answer. We have fires out in California, out in the in the rural areas, and we send thousands of people from all over to deal with it. We fly over water to drop it on the fire. We do whatever is necessary to put the fire out. When the hurricane hits and it hits straight on into New Orleans, we don't just say, well, how many people do we have in New Orleans to fight it? We bring people in from everywhere, and we do it immediately because human life is at stake. That's the urgency that's missing here now. That's the urgency that's missing here now, and our responsibility is to be very clear, not only that we just won't tolerate it again, but we're going to have specific, concrete ideas about how to do that. And that's exactly where we go forward. Let me go to questions. First, Samantha, you're always very gracious to be here in person. I don't know if you draw the short straw all the time, but you're here in person, so you get to ask the first question and as many follow-ups as you like.
Thank you very much. much. My first question, earlier today, the governor, he specifically called out PSE&G and Con Edison, saying that both companies did a lousy job, and that if they don't provide a service, that their franchise can be revoked. If they don't implement the changes that you see fit, and other changes that maybe the state sees fit, do you think that's something that really does need to be done here?
Well, I think the governor's shown already with his de-operation of Lilco, Long Island Lighting Company, when it insufficiently responded in some crises out there, that quote unquote they pulled the plug on Lilco. So I'm sure he'll do it again. I think the governor's immediate reaction is exactly my immediate reaction, and that is where action comes from. The governor, because of his executive authority, we've seen it played out in COVID. You know, it's his decision to open the schools. It's his decision to close the gyms. That's the power that belongs to that position. As county executive, I have certain powers. I don't have powers over the utility companies. But yes, I think that there's an ultimate price to pay if we can't show the change necessary. Now, we went through a whole process of this, came up with all these recommendations. They were all very good recommendations in the United Westchester report. Assemblyman David Buchwald, members of our administration, we brought together in unity all the local governments. But the key elements of that report were not implemented, and that's why we are today. And I think there is an accounting that the governor is going to make, and I'm going to support him in that direction.
And one more question. You know, a lot of people are concerned about old-timers right now, especially if they don't have air conditioning. Some old-timers might not have computers, smartphones, or even a way of watching this press conference or our coverage later. In light of the pandemic, do you think there's a safe way for people to check up on their older neighbors, maybe bring them stuff and just see if they're doing okay?
Well, I think there are two levels of it, Samantha, and you raised the first most important one, which is as a neighborly action for you in your own neighborhood. If you know that down the block is a senior citizen who lives by themselves, maybe you know that their children aren't nearby, yes, you should reach out. I happen to know at least one person like that who I contacted over the weekend, and I immediately called, how are you doing? I did have cell service. How are you doing? You okay? Can I get you anything? Do you want me to pick up something? You know, my day was full, but not so full that I couldn't go by the grocery store, get some food, drink, and bring it by. And I think as individuals, we should all try to do that. Structurally, local governments have senior citizen programs. Almost every one, I've visited almost every one more than once. And I think they're in the process of trying to reach out to those seniors, try to reach them by phone if that's possible. It is true that a certain number of seniors aren't as comfortable with modern technology, don't have laptops, may not have cell phones, and they need a visit. And when somebody comes and knocks on your door in the age of COVID, everybody's very dicey about who it is. Talk to them through the door. You don't have to let them into your apartment or into your house. But if there are needs that senior has, hopefully we'll be able to make that outreach. And the county government has a program of senior services which back up the locals, but it is in each local municipality, just like the cooling stations and charging stations have been established locally. That is a function better done at the town, the city, and the village level. And I think it does require governmental outreach. And you, the individual, knowing the people in your neighborhood, if you're in an apartment building down the hall, on the third floor, reach out to people in moments like this.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Yes, we have some
Oh,
from...
no, Kath, before we go there, we have some in the room.
107 school districts in the state have not submitted reopening plans to the schools. Are you satisfied that if these schools aren't really ready to open and do what they're supposed to be doing, that we're not going to have a big influx of new cases?
I think we're all worried about an influx of new cases with or without the plans being in. I don't know how many of those 107 are within Westchester's 44, and I don't want to be, uniquely myopic, but the world that I live in is this county. So in our most recent conversations, it's pretty clear to me that every school district is trying to comply to make the best effort they can to come up with a protocol to open. But there's still a lot of doubt about how wise it is to open or not. And I think the governor has left the door open for local discretion as to what happens in these situations. Now, you start to look around and you say, well, if I've got to, teach my students and I don't open and the district next door to me does open, doesn't that create, a two-tiered level of education that could be problematic? So I think there's going to be discussion amongst those superintendents in the next month as to what happens. To be candid with you, I suppose if I were school superintendent, which I am not, I would probably argue that the month of September should be all remote learning and ease into it. And maybe if we see the numbers continue to drop or we have to handle a certain number of students, special needs students, and those have to be done in person. You let the month of September be that to ease your way in. But that's an opinion. That's not anything that I have the power to implement. I do think that there is flexibility in the governor's order, and I do think that each of the school superintendents are looking at this. And we will be a partner in the testing and the contact tracing and potentially the isolation. If this thing breaks out in any given school, it's going to get shut down. And I don't say that predictively, but it's the same way as Major League Baseball. I'm a big baseball fan, love seeing baseball. You open up the first weekend and you find out, well, the Miami Marlins were infected. And then you find out that a couple of key players in St. Louis Cardinals are infected, and Yoenis Cespedes leaves the Mets. Goodbye. So the way you plan it and the way it actually happens once you start to implement it, I don't know if Major League Baseball will make it through the season. I don't know. I don't think any of us do. I'd like to see baseball, but I also know that if I were a player, I wouldn't want to be infected, and I wouldn't want to go home to my family and young kids and infect them. So there's a real dynamic involved here with the schools. This is the biggest thing we're opening, probably since restaurants, but even restaurants is still voluntary. You go to a restaurant, you don't go to the restaurant. You go to the office, maybe you can work from home. School, if school's open and it's mandatory, you have to participate. And we'll see how it plays out. I'm hopeful, but the jury is out until we get into it. And I do think, from my mindset, that we're prepared, just as I said when we were talking about our various parks. Some of you may remember when I said we're going to open this park, we're going to open this beach, but if it doesn't work, we're going to shut it down. I think that has to be your mindset. We're going to open it under the best possible protocols. We're going to monitor what happens on the ground, and if there's a reason to shut it down, we shut it down in order to make the right decision. Other questions from anyone? I guess now we'll go remote.
Okay, now it's my turn. Okay. The first question comes from Bruce from the River Journal. He would like to know, what leverage does a municipality have over utilities and how they handle power outages?
Truthfully, Bruce, very little. Local governments, even governments as big as the city of Yonkers, fourth largest city in the state, arguably going to be the third largest city when the census is done, very little leverage over utilities. Utilities operate under state charters. They operate over a wide region. Con Edison is not just Westchester County. Con Edison is Manhattan and the Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, Brooklyn. They're a very large corporation and a very large interest. Verizon is a utility, and Verizon, of course, is a nationwide entity between its wireless services as well as its copper line or the hard line service areas. Altice is an international company, French-based, that bought the old Cablevision system as we know it. And, these are big entities. So when someone goes to Village Hall in Dobbs Ferry and is frustrated, when somebody goes to the town board in North Castle or sees the town supervisor, Mike Shalero, out and about, and they say, you have to do something, they don't understand that these entities are regulated at a much higher level than the town government or the village government, or for that matter, the county government. Do we have a voice? Yes. Do we use the voice? Yes. When we talk to the media, we use it. It's more important that we do it in the private conversations that we have with these individuals, and to try to move them. But the decisions being made by all utility companies take into account that these utility companies have shareholders. And the shareholders and the profit structure of these companies and the managers, even the most senior managers, are not operating under the pressure of the local government. They're operating under market pressure. They're operating under pressure to shareholders, perhaps Wall Street pressure to show the return on investment for the people that invest in those companies. And they're responding to the state government and arguably the federal government, which has the ability to regulate them.
Okay. The next question comes from David Proper from the Journal News. He would like to know, are the COVID-19 numbers about what you would expect now, more than a month after phase 4?
I think the numbers are encouraging. I guess, there's always sort of a built-in sense of let us not have a victory lap. Let's pump the brakes a little bit here on the joyride, because we don't know a lot about the virus itself. The infection itself and how it may morph. So the numbers are good. They're slightly better day after day. We haven't had the great incremental drop that we had when we were on the downside of the bell curve. We shot up very quickly. And then we flattened out. We flattened it out below the level at which we would have had a crisis where we didn't have enough healthcare facilities. As we've come down the slope, we had a pretty steady descent from that mid to late April period of time through May, June, July, but now it's starting to flatten out a little bit. It's still dropping, but it's dropping at a much lower ratio. And, for those of us who remember our math in high school, which I don't really remember, those bell curves, go up and they come back down. It's a long flattened on the downslope. So I'm not overly enthusiastic. And with each passing month, there's a different challenge. We went through, if you go back to June, the high school graduation period. Great concern over would that spike the numbers. It had a couple of little incidents, but it didn't really spike overall. July 4th was a concern. Many people talked about all of the different rallies that were held for racial justice. Would they spike the numbers? Those didn't do it. Opening beaches and pools, those didn't do it. So we passed those tests. Now we're in the vacation month and a half, the end of July and all of August, where people travel. Will that create a problem? Will somebody coming in from another place, will we go to some place, come back and bring the virus back? Will that get a spike? If we get through August, worry about the school system. Then you get later into the year, what will you worry about? We'll enter flu season. We enter flu season, you can come down with the flu and it looks just like COVID. And, you get a flu shot, which generally works, but it's not 100% effective. And how will you handle that? All of these things are different things, David, that are yet to come. So the numbers are encouraging, and they're continue to head in the right direction. But there's still more things, there's still more hoops that we're going to have to jump through in order to know whether we've really turned the corner on this. And, we just don't know. And it's always better to be a little humble, to be a little more controlled in your enthusiasm, because if there's a spike around the corner, we have to have the resiliency to say, all is not lost. Here's a spike, and here's how we're going to deal with trying to put it back under control.
One more question from David. He'd like to know, do you think gyms, movie theaters, and other venues still closed can reopen?
Well, it's very subjective. I think, and I think the governor's people are working on this, so I don't want to jump ahead of whatever he would look at. I think there are ways to look at the gym, health club world and deal with capacities and potentially reopen them. And I'm sure they're working on that to try to figure it out. There's nothing that's opened at full capacity. Restaurants are not at full capacity. Office buildings are not at full capacity. So I think there's probably a path to do that. It's very hard to imagine a movie theater because the movie theater experience is you're in the dark, and you're enjoying a big screen. And in order for the economics of the movie theater to work, there have to be a large number of seats. It's almost like, in order for baseball to work, you have to have a large number of people in attendance, except that baseball and the other sports have contracts with major advertising entities. A movie theater wouldn't have that. We certainly have done movies outside, drive-in theater outside, but that means it doesn't matter. If you have an asset, you have a multiplex theater, and you are not having anybody come into it, you are going to lose that business. And in fact, many of the major movie businesses now are on the threat of going under and may in fact go under. And that is because even where they're allowed and are open, you're not getting the attendance. Because the biggest thing that we're not calculating, we talk about open this and open that, just because you open something does not guarantee that there's consumer confidence to come out and use the service of the facility at the same level you did before. And I know from my prior experience in business, there's a certain percentage of occupancy you need. There's a certain rate that you need in order to make a go of it. You can get some of that back when you open the doors because there are people who say, I'll go. But if a significant portion of people won't interact, then the economics won't work. And you open the doors and you're going to have a certain amount of labor costs. You're going to add costs because of all the sanitization and the things that you're going to have to do. And it may not be, successful. This is where the federal government has to have a different attitude. And I'm not looking to make a political statement out of this per se. But the federal government has to take charge, which it has not yet done. It has to take charge of how this process works. Because nationwide businesses can't survive if Florida does one thing, New York does another thing, and California does this, but Texas does that. It needs a national strategy. We're not looking to socialize things, but we are in the middle of a serious pandemic where we've lost over 150,000 people. And we're going to continue to lose more if there isn't that kind of rational across-the-board situation. But when you don't get that kind of strategy, now you leave it up to governors, you leave it up to local officials. Well, I worry about Westchester. I care about Putnam, but I don't control Putnam. I care about Westchester. And I might have one set of strategies, Putnam might have another, Fairfield might have a third. That doesn't work. You need an overall national strategy to deal with. No other country in the world took a regionalized strategy, only the United States, because of the construct of our states. But there are times when you have a federal government for a reason. You know, you wouldn't imagine national defense to be up to each state. If we were being attacked, well, New York gets its army together. You know, that was the whole foundation for the country of colonies to join together as a single entity, the United States of America. And in fighting something like this, you need that unity. And I'm hopeful that we'll find it, that, necessity being the mother of invention, we have a need to be able to deal with this. And the way we deal with it until we get the virus vaccine and the virus antiviral treatment is each of us do our own thing. Our numbers look good, but other places look bad. That's not a strategy. So I think that's the short-term answer, and the feds have to step in, and they have to step in economically here too. We're going through a crisis. We will get through the crisis, but we need to treat it as a crisis, not as business as usual. So, no other questions. Thank you all for being here and being in attendance again, and we welcome any other questions to Catherine for anybody who may be watching this from our friends in the press. We are going to do some additional updates this week. I believe we're scheduled to do an update tomorrow on the power outage issue. If there's any COVID-related things, we'll cover that as well. We're not trying to have the George show every day, but we do want to be able to give you accurate information. And since the power outage issue is before us in real time, and hopefully tomorrow, day 7, we'll see some significant improvement and maybe a completion, I hope, of all of this. And then we will reserve the right to come back again later in the week, which would probably be a wrap-up, I hope, on the power outage issue, that everybody will be back up and then we'll make some assessments, share some numbers at that point in time. And we have a few other mechanisms to reach out to, but we'll try to be as communicative as you need us to be. But in any event, thank you all. Thank you for watching. This has been a little bit of a longer program, but obviously we have 2 major issues that are immediately at hand. We will also keep you posted on the rescheduled date for our police reform and reinvention effort, which is part of one of our other major issues we're dealing with. And in due time, we'll be back to talk about the finances of the county, which is our 4th major issue. We don't lack for major issues. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.